What's up, my biker friends, and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to break down how this luggage setup that you can see here held up during my Iceland trip. What are the things that worked well, what are the features that I ended up really using, and what are the things that didn't work so well, and what are the surprises after using these bags for more than 9,000 kilometers. The Iceland trip has been on my bucket list for many years, and the initial idea that I had how I would do the trip was completely different than how I ended up doing it. The initial idea was maybe to do it on a much lighter motorcycle. The 1290 Super Adventure R is definitely one of the heaviest adventure bikes that you can use for that purpose. I was a bit concerned about the weight of the bike and the tracks that I would ride, and of course I didn't plan to go camping. That just came up just a few weeks before that, the idea of actually going camping in Iceland and extending the trip up to 4 weeks. Now, the initial concern that I had with the size and the weight wasn't really a big deal in Iceland. I managed quite well with the size of the motorcycle. I also managed quite well with the weight. I had 60 kilograms, and that's without the water and additional food supply. And also the size of the bags. You know, they're pretty wide, and if you're in urban areas and need to weasel through traffic, that's not a good thing. But in Iceland, you've got tons of space, so it was never really a problem having sort of wide bags on the motorcycle. Now, the weight and size wasn't really a problem for most of the trip, considering that I had plenty of water crossings to take the bike through with this big setup, and it was never really an issue. Even if I went through the water crossings by myself, the weight didn't really bother me. As long as I had the bike balanced, it wasn't really a problem. Up until the very last day when I hit a sandy section in one of the last F-roads that I took. And it was deep sand. There were already sort of ruts in there from vehicles going in, and it was deep, very powdery sand. And I heard about that track from other riders. And that's the first time I started to struggle with the setup. The bike is just too heavy for that, and then plus the load. I was passing a VW bus, four-wheel bus, and I was passing the bus, and soon after that I ended up in the sandy section, and it didn't take long for the bus to catch up with me. I was struggling, just trying to stay on the foot pegs, and it was wearing me out quite a bit, and it was the only and first crash that I had in Iceland with these bags. So at some point I couldn't hold my balance, and I tipped over to the left side, and there were some sort of lava rocks, and the bike landed on its left side. I didn't hurt myself, nothing happened. I jumped off the bikes, and that's the first time I crash tested the Moto Bags. And that's one of the benefits of having these semi-rigid bags. I think I hit a couple of these lava rocks on the left pannier. If they would have been aluminum panniers, there would have been dents in it, and they might have not closed properly again. That's not something that happened with the Moto Bags. They basically cushioned the fall, if nothing else. So that was the only time I was struggling, but it was not so much the luggage setup, but just the size of the entire rig, really. I mentioned water crossings, and I had a lot of water crossings in the highlands of Iceland. That was one of the reasons why you go to Iceland. You want to see the highlands, you want to go on the gravel roads, and of course you have to go through a lot of water. That was a pretty good test to see how the Moto Bags would hold up. I know they are not 100% waterproof. I mean, the shell and everything is waterproof, but they have little drain holes in there. So there's a chance that the water may come in from the bottom, especially when you cross water. That was never really the case, and I almost wonder why they put the holes in the bottom of this bag, because yeah, it's easier to drain the water, but if you really have water in it, you could take the bag off and just spill the water out. So I don't know why that is, but even with the holes in it, I never really had any serious water coming in. The only moisture I would get into the bag is actually the stuff that I probably put in because I was camping more than 2 out of the 3 weeks while I was in Iceland, and more than enough, I had parts of the tent, or all of the tents, that was pretty wet. So the way I did it is I didn't put the tent back in the dry bag. I actually put it straight into the Moto Bag, and of course there's quite a bit of moisture that sort of accumulates over time. There wasn't really a puddle of water, but there's moisture in the bag. But I would assume that's coming from the tent that I was putting in. One of the key features that the Lone Rider Moto Bags have is that you can lock the bags. It's not super secure, but it's not less secure than any of the hard panniers with the locking system in there. So you can use padlocks. There is a sort of metal latch that you can use and put a padlock through. And that's something that I've used quite a few times. So I've used it when I was on the ferry, left all my stuff on the bike. I just took the bag with the clothes and I just locked the bags up, left the drones in it as well. I used it on campgrounds that are quite busy. So at nighttime, when you're sleeping, someone could just get to your stuff. So I used the padlocks and locked the bags. Also, when I stayed nights at the hotel, I didn't want to bring all the camping stuff in, and I could lock everything that was in the bags, and I didn't really have to worry about that. So when I initially packed for the trip, I made sure that everything fits snug so I can lock the bags when I'm away from the bike. But one of the things I had to learn on the trip is that if you're bringing additional food, and we had to go to the grocery store and get additional food or cans of beer, and I didn't really account for that while I was packing early on. Now the good thing about the moto bags is you can overpack them quite a bit. So I can show you that. If you open up the roll top, it goes pretty high. So there were quite a few times when I would pack the bag up to here, and you can still roll it and close it. You can still ride with it to some degree. Sometimes the bag would be like this, sort of a bit fuller than I had initially intended to. You can't put a padlock in anymore, but you can bring additional stuff. And I thought that was a really, really cool feature that I didn't think of before I left for the trip. In my introduction video, I introduced the mini bags really briefly, and I said I had a third one on the way, which I mounted in front of this side of the bag. So the mini bags were awesome. There's a lot of small items that I put in, and the easy access stuff for smaller items where I didn't want to go into the larger compartment of the moto bags. And I used that quite intensively. I had a lot of things in sort of the rear bag here, the little locks that I had in there. I had the towel in the front one. I had my little headlight in there, and sort of little things I needed access to. I had the tire cleaning kit and the sort of chain loop kit, all the stuff I needed quick access to. The tire pump that was also in there. So a lot of little things that I could put into the mini bag, and that was really, really cool. After the trip, I also found another use for the sort of mini bags, because you can mount them not just to the mole panel, but a lot of people use them for the front crash bars. And I don't have any front crash bars, but what I did use when I took the moto bags off, I mounted one of those mini bags on top of the pannier rack through my last trip to Italy, where I didn't need all the storage capacity of the moto bags. So I didn't bring moto bags, but I had the little mini bag on top of there where I had in the tire pump, a tire repair kit, little snacks in there. So it's a really versatile little bag, and I have similar bags like this from other manufacturers, but the mini bag was a really good surprise. All the things that you can do with it, not just mounting it to a moto bag. So that was really cool. Now I introduced the bottle holders in my first impression video, and I had two bottles in there. Now it's empty. But that's also something I use quite intensively because I spend so many nights at a campground, and it's always good to have water. Now many of the campgrounds, there is not really wild camping in Iceland, so there are campgrounds, there's running water. Sometimes they're not equipped that well. You have just running water and maybe a toilet or something. Sometimes they have a bit more, a shower and sort of a dining room and things like that. But even if they had all the equipment and our sort of camping site would be far away from the water source, it would be nice to have water just for cooking and the basic things. And also it's good to have extra water. While I was riding out into the off-roads, sometimes if you're so far out, if something happens, you break down, maybe you need to spend the night, it's good to have some extra water. I had a water bladder with 2 liters or 2.5 liters of water, and I've got another 2 liters in the 2 bottles. So it's something that I really appreciate to have on this bike. No, most of the time the bags weren't really in the way of my riding. The only time that I did notice that I have sort of side panniers on the bike is the few times when I was riding off-road, and most of the times I would try to stay on the foot pegs, but there are those occasions where you drop down to your seat because something is difficult in the terrain. So I had that in a few water crossings where I had to set the foot down, and if you're sitting on your seat and you start paddling with your legs, something you shouldn't do when you ride off-road, but sometimes it takes a few seconds to get back up on the pegs. I would hit my sort of feet on the side of the panniers. Now it's something that sort of startled me at first because I'm not used to having panniers on the bike. But it's also something to consider, especially when you start accessorizing the bag. How much room do you want to leave for yourself in order for you to have a bit more leg room if you tend to sit down a lot while you're riding off-road. Let's talk about the Overlander bag. I spent quite a bit of time during my initial impressions video to go through all the features that this bag has, and it has tons of features. I think one of the key features on the Iceland trip for me was the fact that you can leave the bag mounted and you can access your content. In the first few nights I was camping, I would take the bag off and I would put it into the tent, but then soon after that I just left the bag on the bike and I kind of lived out of the bag. This is where my clothes were, and it was quite easy to access it and just have it sort of securely mounted on the bike. It was a lot easier to get to it. Had I used a sort of traditional roll top bag, I would have to take the straps off, and then of course, the bag would sort of wiggle around. And on some of the campgrounds, I didn't want to put the bags into sort of the wet grass or something, so it was actually better mounted on the bike. Also, it's right height to get to the stuff. So that was something that I really appreciated. Second thing, I used a few times because towards the end of the trip, I was staying more and more in hotels. Not so much for the rain, but for the wind. The wind was absolutely crazy in Iceland. So in those windy conditions, it's really difficult to even set up a tent or sleep in a tent or pack it back up again. So towards the end of it, temperatures was dropping and the wind was picking up. So I was spending quite a few nights in a hotel. So then the shoulder straps came in quite handy. So, I could just take the bag, put the one side over the shoulder or both sides and have my hands free and bring this stuff into the hotel that I wanted to bring into. So that was another feature that I've used. Another thing I added after my initial impression video was this cheapo Molly bag. This is a no-name, not even waterproof bag, but I was kind of playing around with it. I also had bottle holders on the top of these, which I didn't really use. I just put them on there. I wasn't quite sure if I would use them. I just learned that I can overpack the moto bag, so I didn't really use them. But this little bag was kind of cool because it had all my power bars and snacks in there. A lot of times in Iceland where I didn't stop for lunch and that's all I had to eat during the day. That's quite kind of cool. I think Lone Rider makes similar sort of mini bags. You can use theirs and they're waterproof. But I had this thing lying around, so I kind of tried it out with the Overlander. So that was quite useful as well. So summarizing the experience that I've had with all the bags in Iceland, pretty much performed as expected. The initial concerns I might have had with the Overlander bag and the buckle system, if they would hold up, and I ended up actually putting a lot more luggage into the Overlander, kind of overpacked it a little bit too. So it's quite heavy, not a problem. Over 9,000 kilometers, a good part of that on gravel roads, going through water, quite bumpy roads, was not a problem at all. I was pleasantly surprised to see that you can extend the capacity of the moto bags. That was something that came in really handy when we got food supplies in the grocery stores. Really, really awesome. The one crash that I had with the Overlander bag onto lava rocks, that had been an aluminum pannier. That would have not went so well. And, that's kind of the benefit of these semi-rigid bags. There wasn't even a dent in the bag. It just kind of cushioned the fall, if nothing at all. The accessories, really cool. The bottle holders came in really handy. It's something I used every day while camping. The mini bags, also great. I'm really happy that I got the third one the day before I left. And so I could have sort of small items with quick access. And I used that quite a bit as well. So I'm super, super happy with the capacity. The only thing I might change in a future setup, is trying to keep the luggage down, but somehow if you've got to bring everything, you're not packing light anymore. If you're bringing a tent, kitchen, the whole 9 yards, you're done with the light packing part, especially if you live off your bike for 3 weeks. But the Overlander, it comes in the larger size. This is the 30 liter, there's a 40 liter version. If I had to do it again, I'll probably take the larger bag the next time around. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this useful. Some real world experience. I was quite thrilled with the setup. Thank you, Lone Rider, for providing the equipment. It's something I had on my rider anyway, and they were so kind to provide that for the trip. And if you got any questions, comments, put them in the comment section. If you're interested in Lone Rider's gear, if you haven't heard of him, there's an affiliate link. So if you click on it, they know that you came through the website. If you buy through it, there's a little bit of money coming back to the channel. You don't have to do it, but of course it would help out the channel, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, ride safe and stay awesome.